Catholic Church has been shaken by many storms throughout its history. The particular characteristic of the crisis we witness today lies in the fact that the tempest remains within the visible structures of the Church. Those appointed to positions of ecclesiastical authority are the ones trying to subvert Roman Catholicism. They have no intention of establishing a new church. They are after something far more sinister, a Catholic Church in tune with the modern world. The revolt began 6 decades ago, and it was possible only because it was presented to the public as a universal reform brought about by an apparent general council, approved by an apparent pope. Imagine if Arius, Nestorius, or Luther had been less honest, and instead of declaring their heresy openly and in defiance of the Church's authority, they had played the role of faithful Catholics until their ascendance to the throne of Peter. Roncalli and Montini did exactly that. Fast forward to the present day. From the current Pope-elect down to the local parish priest, the religion being taught by the Catholic hierarchy is not Roman Catholicism, but a naturalistic humanitarian creed rooted in the principles of modernism. Very few Catholics are aware of this, precisely because the changes that produced the new religion were promulgated by the apparent authority of the Catholic Church. It is the role of the Catholic apologist to show that Vatican II and the doctrinal, disciplinary, and liturgical reforms which have proceeded from it are substantial alterations of the Catholic faith, and therefore incompatible with the authority of an indefectible and infallible Church. This we have done by means of articles, sermons, and conferences. All sedevacantists agree with regard to the fact of the lack of authority of Vatican II popes, but not all sedevacantists agree on how this privation takes place. One side argues that public heresy is what prevents them from having authority and even valid elections. The other side argues that although papal elections continue to be valid, the conferral of authority is impeded by an objective intention incompatible with the acceptance of the papacy on the part of the elect. The main difficulty with the public heresy argument is that it does not address the current crisis properly. The crisis which we face is not a problem about the Pope as he is a private person to the point of perhaps being a public heretic as a private individual. The problem which we face is much wider. A new religion is being imposed on the Church, and this is absolutely incompatible with the authority of Blessed Peter. The Vatican II popes cannot be true popes because they are imposing a false religion. A second difficulty with the public heresy argument is that even if we consider that it could theoretically explain the lack of authority in Vatican II popes, it cannot give an explanation as to why the rest of the hierarchy would lack authority. The appointments made by a Vatican II pope would still be valid, since the presumption of law favors the possessor of a legal title. The papal conclave that elected Jorge Bergoglio on March 13, 2013, certainly gave Bergoglio a title to the papacy and also caused the common error by which the community falsely believes that Francis enjoys actual jurisdiction. It follows from this that all diocesan bishops appointed by Pope Francis would enjoy a colored title, and therefore supplied jurisdiction in their respective territories, no matter how little orthodoxy they may have. An unsentenced simple heretic, that is, someone guilty of a delict of heresy but still claiming to be a member of the Catholic Church, can validly elect and be elected in the Church. No automatic penalty would deprive him of this faculty. Without attempting a thorough examination of the canonical crime of heresy, this has already been done by Father Duterte, this video will explain the important distinction that exists between the factual and the legal orders, and show, first of all, that pointing out the factual public heresy of the Novus Ordo hierarchy does not prove that the said hierarchy lacks authority, and secondly, that pointing out the legal status of the Novus Ordo hierarchy does not justify being part of the new religion. What are the factual and the legal orders? Someone can be in fact a murderer if he has killed an innocent person, but is not a murderer before the law until he has been convicted of it. If his trial should find him innocent, he remains before the law an innocent man, even though he is in fact a murderer. The opposite could happen. An innocent man can be falsely accused of murder and convicted. Before the law, he is a murderer. In fact, he is not. So it is possible that someone could enjoy a legal status which does not reflect the reality of what he is. Usually the law is slow to recognize the reality. Nestorius, for example, was a public heretic in 428, but was not legally declared a heretic and legally deposed from his see until 431. Luther was a public heretic in 1517, but was not excommunicated legally until 1521. In both cases, these heretics in fact ceased to be Catholics when they published their heresies, but remained legally Catholics until their legal separation from the Church by the Church authorities. The reason for this twofold and sometimes conflicting standard is that society, any society including the Church, is not a mob. Society is a moral person, and like a person, has its own senses, its own intellect, and its own will, which may lag behind factual reality and may even at times err in its assessment of reality. So the innocent may at times be condemned as guilty, and the guilty may at times be declared innocent. But in reality, before God, they remain what they truly are, innocent or guilty. In a sacred theology, the distinction between the order of fact and the order of law is clearly established. Franciscus Bordonus, a theologian and canonist active in the 17th century, distinguishes between the two orders in the case of heresy or schism. After having quoted a letter by Saint Cyprian to Pope Stephen, the saint urged the Pope to appoint a new bishop at Arles, where the bishop had become a Novatianist. Bordonus concludes, "Heretics, therefore, and schismatics, who have separated themselves from the Church of God before God, and as regards the communion of the saints, are still within the same in respect to power and dignity in the favor of the Catholics until they are cast out by sentence and are deprived of their dignity, office, and power. From this, it is clear to reason that a manifest heretic is within the Church as to the external forum until he is expelled by sentence, so much so that just as by a positive public act a man is received into the Church, of which he becomes a member by the reception of baptism, so he is dismembered from the same and deprived of privileges by a judgment of the same Church. In summary, Bordonus teaches first that in the factual order that is before God, a public but undeclared heretic ceases to be a member of the Church, and second, that the same heretic retains his power and dignity in the legal order, that is, before the Church, until he is expelled by a legal sentence. By the way, the technical term to designate an undeclared public heretic, according to Bordonus, is suspect of heresy. At the beginning of this video, we said that very few Catholics are aware of the true nature of Vatican II because the reforms were promulgated by the apparent authority of the Catholic Church. But even those who acknowledge the heretical character of the Council have fallen into a sort of legalism, what His Excellency Bishop Sanborn calls ecclesiastical materialism. They look at the legal visible structure of the Church and they conclude that authority and ecclesiastical jurisdiction must of necessity be found in the said structure. Perhaps they would like to quote Bordonus, according to which factual heresy is compatible with power, office, and dignity. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we find some sedevacantists who, ignoring the true teaching of theologians and canonists, affirm that factual public heresy automatically deprives clergy of all power, office, and dignity, including legal status in the Church, before any legal sentence is pronounced. Those of us who adhere to the Cassiciacum thesis address the issue from a different perspective. We do recognize the importance of the legal status of the Novus Ordo hierarchy to the extent of making it an essential part of our position. Indeed, the apostolicity of formal succession demands uninterrupted continuity and a legitimate mission by virtue of which legitimate jurisdiction and authentic magisterium are obtained. In other words, the legal order can never disappear. The Church must always be ruled by pastors who succeeded the apostles in the same rule and government. But the thesis also acknowledges that Vatican II is an objective deviation from the faith, and that the same subject cannot intend to teach Vatican II doctrines and simultaneously possess the power to rule, teach, and sanctify the Church. Ecclesiastical jurisdiction is the public power of governing and leading the faithful towards the goal of eternal life. A public heretic is able to retain jurisdiction because he can still lead the faithful to heaven if he does not intend to impose his heresy upon the faithful. But what happens if he does intend to impose it? Would Christ be willing to grant this person power to destroy his flock? It is evident that the crisis of the Church goes beyond the issue of public heresy and public heretics. If this were the only problem, there would not be real justification for a traditional movement. Every Catholic would be bound to submit to Francis and to the local bishop, follow the legal, deal with the factual, and carry on. The universal imposition of Vatican II paints a different picture. The factual order says that the Church has been taken over by the enemy, the positions of authority have been hijacked, and now Catholics have to flee to the mountains in order to survive.